Hello and welcome to the Royal Opera House in London, wherever you're joining us from this evening, whether in the UK or some far-flung part of the world many miles from here. You're very welcome to the Claw Studio. I'm Petrock Trelawney and welcome to tonight's Insights, which is supported by Rolex. This evening I am going to be in conversation with the American tenor Russell Thomas, who is here to take the title role in Verdi's Otello. Verdi's retelling of Shakespeare's story is the most thrilling opera, one of the most powerful in the repertoire, the perfect mix of music and theatre, high drama and extraordinary moments of intimacy. Keith Warner's production opens here at the Royal Opera House on the 12th of July. Its star arrived in London from America on Tuesday, started rehearsals on Wednesday, and he's here with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Russell Thomas. Great to have you here.
Thank you, thank you. Hello.
That's not hanging around, is it? You're off that plane from Atlanta on Tuesday and straight to work the next day.
Yes, I actually flew from Los Angeles. I had a performance on Sunday.
Wow.
Flew on Monday, here on Tuesday, Wednesday starting rehearsal.
And there was also the business of costume fitting. We've got actually your costume behind us. I think you were in a fitting for that this afternoon.
This afternoon, yes. Yeah. It was a great costume. There are 4 costumes for this year, which usually one doesn't get, but I'll take it. Yeah.
It's quite an old-fashioned looking costume because, as we were saying, the irony is the production is very modern.
Very modern. I've only seen photographs. I've only seen photographs of the production, which I'm excited to actually be immersed in the entire experience. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about that later. Tell us about your previous experiences of London. I think it was about 2007 that you made your debut in a John Adams work.
A new John Adams piece with the London Symphony at the Barbican Centre, actually, called The Flowering Tree. Yeah. Directed by Peter Sellers, with a libretto sort of put together also by Peter Sellers. That was a quick situation. My first, actually, commercial recording as well. So there was a lot of firsts here in London with that production, yeah.
And working with Peter Sellers, I know he's someone you have a good relationship with, a good creator.
Great relationship. I absolutely adore him and his work, yeah.
Yeah. We first saw you here at the Royal Opera House in 2013 in Simon Bocanegra.
Yeah, that was my role debut of Gabriele Adorno as the tenor role in that production.
Yeah. So then a long absence, 9 years, before you've come back to join us. Have you been sort of retreading old paths in London in the 48 hours you've been here?
No, I've been trying to catch up on sleep and not to fall asleep at the wrong times. Yeah. No, but I love this city. I've actually been in London since then, but not here at the Royal Opera. Yeah.
Well, let's start at the beginning and establish how your career began. I think you were 8 when you were first bitten by the opera bug.
Yes, I came home from a grade school and I was listening to the radio, looking for just some regular R&B music, and I passed a station of people singing kind of funny. I later learned that it was Weber's Oberon, with I think Birgit Nilsson and I think Placido Domingo was in that, And every day after that one experience, I came home every day listening for that radio station just to hear the way people were singing. I had no clue what it was I was listening to, but there was a visceral, a very strong emotion that tied me to that piece. Yeah.
Can you put your finger on what it was? Was it the music? Was it the drama? Was it the mystery and the magic?
I think it was the singing. It was the fact that the human voice and those human voices could make that kind of sound. You know, I didn't know what that sound was, but I knew that I connected with it.
Yeah. And there's that wonderful serendipity, isn't there, of, as you say, spinning the dial and looking for one station, coming across another. I hope that still happens in the more modern tech world of being able to just search for things. But I think it makes it really important as to why we put this art form out there in broadcasts, in cinema relays, online, so that people can stumble across it and it can try and find a way of regenerating itself that way.
Absolutely. It's the access to this and the exposure to this art form that will keep it alive for many years, you know. I think so. And the next young Russell Thomas somewhere listening to the radio, getting bit by that opera bug, you know.
Tell me about your grandmother.
Oh, my grandmother, a very special woman. She's still with us. She was a very religious woman. So we went to church all the time, and I sang in church all the time. She was always encouraging me to sing. That's a huge thing. And I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, more than my own mother or anybody else. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, a very special person to me.
And did she obviously approved of you singing in church? Did
Yes.
she approve of this newfound interest in opera?
She did. I mean, she was, the first time I actually saw opera live, I was 12. And I said, oh, I want to do that when I grow up. And as the perfect grandmother would say, of course, baby, you can do that when you grow up. That was who she was, or who she is, always encouraging in that maternal way.
And did that singing in church give you a kind of base? I mean, it's amazing how many American singers have launched their careers or in the earlier stages of their musical lives, perhaps rather than careers, have sung in church or have sung in synagogues, have come from faith places and broadened that out into something bigger.
I mean, I grew up in a charismatic church. You sang to get a reaction. So I think those are the similarities. I sing on stage to make people feel something. I sang in church to make people feel something. Sort of the warmer up or for the preacher that day, just to get people, their spirits moved to then to accept the word,
So a sense that you were carrying people with you.
Absolutely. It's I can't explain it really, but if you grew up in a charismatic church, if you grew up in particularly the black church, and music in the black church is very important. I think I practiced as an Episcopalian most of my adult life, but music is also very important in the Episcopalian church. It was very important in the black church to have sort of very good music, and we had a small church, but it was very good music in that small church.
You were singing at school as well, I think, in a
school choir. Yes.
And there was that where you thought maybe this could be more than a hobby?
Well, when I was in high school, yes. We have this thing, I don't know if you guys have it in the UK, but there is every year you have to do solos for, not necessarily a prize, but they give you a rating. You can be superior, excellent, or whatever the case is. And I had a solo that year, and my choir teacher invited an opera singer to help us all with our solos.
Can you remember what it was?
My solo. I don't remember what my solo was. But funny enough, that teacher does remember what the solo was. Every time she talks about it, she tells the song that it is, and I can't remember what it is right now. But this wonderful woman, Joy Davidson, came to help us with our solos. And about 15, 20 seconds into me singing, she stopped me and said, "What are you doing for college?" I was like, "I don't know, I'm going to the military academy, I'm going to do something along those lines." And she said, "Have you thought about being an opera singer? You could really be an opera singer." And that's all I needed to hear. I dropped everything else, and I trusted what this woman said. And I had no clue if I could or couldn't, but I trusted what she said, and she was right.
So you might have been a soldier.
I might have been a soldier. Being a soldier was a way to being a politician.
Right.
Yeah, that was the ultimate goal.
And we'll come on to this later, but maybe being an opera singer is also a route to being
Yes.
a politician. So what happened next? Where did you begin sort of formal studies?
At the school where Joy Davidson was the chair of the vocal department, it's called New World School of the Arts. It's a small public conservatory. At the time, it was connected to the University of Florida in Gainesville, although the school was in Miami and Florida. And she specialized and she trained young singers how to be opera singers, how to be soloists, and she encouraged the individual voice and finding your individual voice. It's not the typical training that you get in American music schools, but she knew what she was. We had at one point four singers of a very small college of 30. There were only 30 vocalists at one time, but 4 of us that I was in school with at the same time, we were all singing at the Met at one time.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good, ratio there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was creating sort of singers who were individuals rather than being a sort of genre of voice?
Yes, not necessarily genre, but she was training everybody to be opera singers. But the idea was to find your individual voice. Don't try to sound like this famous singer here or this famous singer there, to find your individual voice. You know, yeah.
You did have, I guess, operatic heroes,
Absolutely,
as everyone does. Who was yours? Who is yours?
I have a few. You know, I have a lot. But Carlo Bergonzi is for me, because I sing a lot of Verdi. For me, he is the model. There's John Vickers. You know, to me, the greatest singing actor tenor ever, and that is very important. Dame Gwyneth Jones, also for the same reasons. I have a lot. I could sit here all day naming people's names, but those are three of the top. Yeah.
And Carlo Bergonzi was very famous for being very faithful to the score, to putting everything out that was on the page.
He did his best to be as accurate as possible, not with a lot of excesses. When you think of Italian tenors, you usually think of the guy who's going over the top and being excessive emotionally and emoting, and they're not always musically accurate, but he was very musically accurate. And so for me, he's the model of the way you sing this Italian repertoire. From Bel Canto to Verdi, even the Puccini roles that he sang as well.
And would you listen to him, and when you first started preparing for Otello, or when you first started preparing for Calaf, would you listen to one of your heroes singing that role, or is that a dangerous thing?
No, it's not a dangerous thing. I love recordings, and I listen to as many recordings as I possibly can find of someone singing any role I'm studying at the time. Right now I'm studying Hernani, so Bergonzi is on repeat for me. But every person that has sung the role, even some modern singers now, I go to YouTube. YouTube is a fabulous thing. I go to YouTube and I watch these guys sing this role to learn the pitfalls of the part. If there's things there in the style or in the tradition that everybody does, I'm writing those notes, trying to get to know those traditions.
Yeah. What did we do before we could search on YouTube?
Yeah,
which we're on this evening,
yeah.
which is fabulous. So people can watch this conversation wherever they are. You work through a series of young artist programs in opera houses in, I think, Tulsa, Seattle, Miami, St. Louis. Presumably in each place laying on another layer of knowledge, another layer of understanding, another layer of experience.
Mostly another layer of experience. Not all of these programs are actually training programs. You know, they just use you for cheap labor. They use the young artists for cheap labor. You're singing a small role, or you're supplementing the chorus or something along those lines. But yeah, there were some of them that were more training oriented than others. Yeah.
And do you remember your first professional role, the first role you sang where a check came in at the end?
Yes, it was the mayor in Albert Herring. Yes, it was the mayor in Albert Herring. Well, there was a Prince of Persia before that in Turandot, the one line that screams before he gets his head chopped off. Yeah. I was a member of the chorus of the Turandot production, so I didn't get an extra check for Prince of Persia. But the mayor in Albert Herring in Miami. Yeah.
And that must have been an exciting moment, both the role and the check.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it was not a lot of money, but you know. That someone actually paid me to sing was huge,
So you end up in one of the great young artists programs in the world, the Lindemann program at the Met in New York.
That was the last one I did, It was, you know, just being in that building where all that history happened, and watching every night, you know, great singers come in. I got to watch Luciano Pavarotti sing his last Cavaradossi there with Carol Vaness, and, you know, I got to see so many amazing shows, ring cycle after ring cycle, you know, Moses and Aaron, you know, seeing Moses and Aaron with great British singers, Phil Landridge, you know, this amazing opportunity to be in that space all the time.
Yeah, and it is as much the tickets, isn't it? Being able to see everything multiple times.
Yes, multiple times, yeah.
Who were the people there who inspired you?
James Levine, his musical assistant Ken Noda, John Fisher, who's from the UK, who gave me a lot of opportunities and a lot of musical coaching.
Who is just the most fantastic coach, isn't he? Sitting at a piano talking to singers.
And he knows every language, and he's, you know, he knows so much about the repertory. and he's just an encyclopedia of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I soaked up all of that knowledge from him as much as I could.
James Levine, I think, was very adamant you should sing Mozart.
Yes.
That was the direction.
Yeah, very adamant. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I got to the Met, in my first audition, I was singing Puccini and all these other things. And I recall him saying, you know, I'll accept you into the program, this Lindemann Young Artist program, but you have to promise me you won't sing any more Puccini. It's like, I love Puccini. You know, why would I not sing any more Puccini? He said, focus on Mozart. Mozart will teach you how to sing. He wasn't wrong. I mean, I'm happy that I made that choice, and I'm happy that it worked out. Yeah.
And our viewers in Wales will remember you singing Tamino.
Tamino, it was
a lot of performances, 26 performances, I think.
Yeah, it was 26. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of performances.
So when you started singing Verdi, did I read that you had to persuade James Levine that he was you sang a lot of the arias for him, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can do it." It was after I started singing, and I started getting re-engaged to sing them, and he called me on the phone out of the blue and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you singing all this Verdi? You know, what happened to Mozart?" And I was like, "Well, I'm still singing Mozart." And he said, "Well, come and sing the stuff for me. I want to make sure you're not hurting yourself." And he basically made me sing through everything I was working on at that time, from Masnadieri to Stifelio, you know, the Duke, all the different Verdi operas that I was working on, Don Carlo. And then when I was done, he said, "You know, you can sing this. You're not hurting yourself." And as I was walking out the door, he said, "But don't sing Otello." that was the one directive. That was the one directive that he gave at the end of that. Meaning ever or meaning not yet?
That's all he said. Yeah. Don't sing Otello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a sort of conscious staircase, if you like, of the Verdi roles? I mean, did you try and take them on in any sort of order? I mean, obviously you couldn't be absolutely explicit about the order, but was there an ascent, if you like?
There was an ascent. I started with, you know, things like Duca, which is written very much in a bel canto style. A lot of the earlier Verdi roles, as much as I could sing those, I did. When I would audition with, you know, the early Verdi arias from the early operas. It wasn't just, you know, directly to Radamés and Forza. It took me a while to get there, and I reluctantly, I didn't even want to get into the heavier things because I enjoyed singing the bel canto side of Verdi. But you know, people kept saying, you know, you should sing this other rep.
We've got some pictures of Simon Bocanegra, which was your Royal Opera House debut, as we mentioned, in 2013. What do you remember about that?
What I remember is I almost missed my debut. I remember that. There was something weird. I mean, I left my flat that I was renting 2 hours early, hour and a half, 2 hours early.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time. And this day I said, because of this show, I don't want to be on public transport. I'm going to get myself a taxi or Uber, and I'm going to go to the theater. I'm going to have a lot of time. It's going to be relaxing. Well, I think that day, unfortunately, someone committed suicide on a track. And everybody from underground came above, and they were all in cars, and traffic was literally not moving. It was at a standstill. I had to get out past Holborn someplace and jog to get here.
I'm feeling anxious just hearing the story.
With 5 minutes, like 5 minutes to the curtain. I almost made, you know, the Royal Opera House go into overtime because they couldn't start the show until I got there. I was so embarrassed. And that first performance didn't go very well. But I did. It took me the entire night to get settled.
Yeah.
But that's what I remember about that more than anything else. The other performances were great. The rest of the run was amazing. But that first night was, it couldn't get any worse than that, I don't think. Yeah.
That's a hairy start, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
You were singing alongside Ferruccio Fellinetto.
Yeah, Ferruccio Fellinetto, yeah.
And I think, again, his voice was another one of those that you felt, different voice type, but you felt there was stuff to be learned here.
Yeah, I mean, we say there's a small duet that we sing, and he just stood over my shoulder singing, and the amount of resonance, and there was not a lot of effort, but he made a lot of sound, and I was just in awe of that all the time, and I've watched him I mean, he's one of, these people that you see on recordings, and there was one of the greats of opera singing alongside me there over my shoulder. I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a thing, isn't it? Someone you've kind of worshipped from afar.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're equals.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say we're equals. We were in the same show. that doesn't make us equals. But yeah, it's one of the, over time, having that experience has been phenomenal. Just to be with some of the heroes of opera. I wish I could have sung with Dame Gwyneth Jones, but, that didn't happen. But being there with Ferruccio, being on stage with Thomas Hampson and Deborah Voigt and these people who are stars of opera is amazing.
And do you get a chance to talk? I mean, do you get a chance to, whether it's, I don't know, asking them advice or whether it's just asking them for stories? I mean, is there a kind of interaction off stage, or is it too busy for that?
Sometimes I'm a person that I don't like to bother people a lot, but if doors open for conversation, I would definitely ask a lot of questions. I'm a student of opera. I love this art form. So for me, getting to know their journeys, getting to know technically how they do what they do is important to me.
Let's talk about Otello.
Okay.
The opera that you were told not to do.
Not to do. Yeah.
How did you end up doing it first?
I was asked to do it a couple of times, and then I started talking about it with my management, and I said, the only way I'd do it is if I could get some symphony orchestra to do it in concert for me, so I don't have to worry about running around wearing 30 pounds of costumes. If I can just stand there and sing it, I can know if I can actually sing it. And the Atlanta Symphony offered to do it in concert, and one of the great American orchestras. And we did it, and it was a huge success. And so I scheduled with 1 year break between the first staged one in Canada at the COC.
So again, doing it in a fantastic opera house, but
Yeah.
slightly perhaps off the spotlight of here or the Met or somewhere like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it didn't put any less pressure because you have someone new singing Otello. Everybody in the world comes everybody in the world comes to see it. But having a supportive opera company, the one thing I regret that I've never done is a production that was built for me. I've always had to put on literally someone else's clothes or someone else's shoes to do this piece, and that's the one regret I have with it. Is that I have not had a production of my own in this part. Yeah.
Yet. So the demands, I think it would be good if you could talk a bit about that it puts on the singer, both vocally and as an actor.
I think they sort of go hand in hand. Vocally, it's not really that challenging. It doesn't go very high or sit very high like Tannhäuser. It doesn't sit, there are some low notes, but it doesn't stay in the basement. It's not particularly long, but when he's on stage, the emotional intensity that's there is it's the killer. Because the emotion goes directly to the throat, and you're trying to figure out how to not shy away from the emotional aspect of the role and still give people a visceral experience or psychological experience, but not threaten your throat. That's the difficulty about it. And again, I've sung it 19 times now, and I think maybe 5 times of those 19 I was successful in not letting the emotion overtake the throat. Yeah.
That's really interesting, balancing that the emotion doesn't run ahead of everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as singers, that's what we're balancing, no matter which opera it is, really. Just imagine a soprano singing Madame Butterfly. She's on stage the entire night. She's having to go through all these emotional changes, and it's the same with a tenor singing Otello, or Peter Grimes. That kind of emotional life that you have on stage, that you don't let it creep in to the throat in a negative way. Yeah.
I mean, he's a fascinating character, isn't he? This hugely successful military man who sort of can't quite muster his personal life quite quite so successfully, this love affair with Desdemona, perceived betrayal, heartbreak, devastation at the end.
I think he's such a human character. I mean, one of the issues I have with it, with the piece, is that people often call him a beast and, an animal and this kind of stuff. He's not, he's human. He's a human character that is, is suffering from PTSD, That's the entirety of there's a mental disorder happening to him, and no one's taking care of him, and he can't get people to take care of him. But the closest person to take care of him is Desdemona, so that he needs her, and that perception that she's no longer on his side, ruins him, and he has to show strength. He has to show strength because of his military position. That has to be very difficult. I can only imagine a man going to war and fighting in these wars, and then having to come home and live with what has happened in those wars and not be able to talk about it. I think he's the most human character.
And it's very interesting to hear you talk about him in that way, because that absolutely makes sense. Talking about this damaged military character with, as you say, PTSD. I mean, that's something that's a key part of Keith Warner's production, but it's sort of modern language that absolutely opens up the piece, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that, again, people didn't talk about mental health even 20 years ago, let alone, in 1700s or in the 1800s.
Yeah.
I think we have to think about these things now, We have to think about them now, and we have to put a human aspect on this character and not just see him as, oh, he's this evil guy, he's this, beast or animalistic person who just kills people, It's not that, think about the manipulation. We've all been manipulated by somebody at some point in our lives. Yeah, we probably didn't go out and kill somebody, but there are people who have because of such manipulation, We have to think about those aspects of a character when we're doing a piece like Otello. I think it's important.
And is it getting to that point, finding that kernel of the personality of the character, that makes it exciting for you as an actor, as a person of the stage?
Yes, absolutely. But I think for me, just from a purely vocal point of view, I'm not Mario del Monaco. There are people who have this sort of very visceral approach to singing, that's very get into the guts of vocalism. I can't do that. I mean, I can, but it won't last for 4 acts. So my approach has always been more of a psychological one, like getting inside the person's head, what's going on and why, and trying to bring that across in the voice as much as possible. Sometimes you have to get a little bit. Act two is the biggest challenge of that entire piece, and then you have to find a way to survive for the next 2 acts.
Yeah.
But act 2 is the act.
Yeah. I get the impression from what you've talked about this production in the past that friends are not going to see you for dinner after the show.
Oh no! This is one of those shows that people. We have a saying in opera. At the end of the night, I can do it. I feel like I can do it again. This is the one show that I've ever, and I feel that way about almost everything I've ever sung, except this. At the end of the night, I just want to crawl into bed and go to sleep, and I usually can't sleep after a show, but this one, I can sleep, and I go and I crawl in bed and I just stay there. So, and a couple of times I've slept for like 15 hours straight,
Yeah.
because just the emotional toll of getting up there and doing this.
Yeah. And this is quite an intense run, isn't it?
It is
sort of all the shows over, 12 days? I think.
Yeah.
Placido Domingo, I think, did the role 223 times.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you seem to be limiting quite carefully how much you're going to do.
Oh, absolutely. I kind of wanted these, I want a year, I said, and then after doing 19 in one calendar year, I said maybe one every 2 years, one production of Otello every 2 years. Yeah, it's a tough one. It takes so much of me vocally and emotionally, and that's not fun. I like to work, but I don't like to work that hard.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. They don't pay me enough for that. Yeah.
But I guess once you've proven you can do it, directors are going to be opera company house bosses are going to be on the phone endlessly saying, "Will you?"
And I mean, I get offered an Otello a lot. Yeah. Because once you, again, as you said, once you start doing it, and if you've been successful at it, even moderately successful at it, it's a never-ending ask. They will continue to ask for it. Yeah.
You're working with Daniele Rastioni on
Yes.
this production, who is a fabulous conductor. I mean, have you worked with him?
We've never worked together before, but just having his energy and his personality, it's so fun and collegial, and he's trying to find ways to explain what he wants. And he's very specific about it, but it's not overbearing, which is beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, July the 12th is the date that it opens here at the Royal Opera House. Let's talk, if we may, about your work as artist in residence at Los Angeles Opera.
Yeah.
Which you might think is about being a singer, but actually that's kind of not even the half of it.
Not for me. I mean, for me, the purpose of that role was to get to know the business of opera on the other side. I don't, I want to be one of these singers that sing until they're 70. I can't imagine living out of a suitcase that long, and not being home and not seeing my family. But I would love to always work in opera. Opera has been good to me, and again, and as I said, I'm a fan of opera. I love opera. So if I could one day run an opera company, I will. That's the ultimate goal for me professionally. So I don't know enough about it. So when they ask me to take on this role, I ask them to train me on what it takes to run an opera company. And so that's what we're doing. And with that, I've developed other programs as well.
And we'll talk about this in a second, but are you literally doing everything? I mean, there's money, there's publicity, there's casting, there's scheduling.
Not the scheduling. I haven't done that. That's a tough job. But yeah, I've helped raise money, and I'm learning how to do that. There's a skill to the folks that can ask people for money. And in America, the entire business is funded by private donations.
And if you're running an opera company, I guess that's 80% of the job, isn't it?
Yes.
It's going out and raising the funds.
And raising the money, absolutely. So I've spent a lot of time talking to the wonderful folks in the development department, fundraising department. But I have done things with the PR and marketing departments, and a little casting as well. Yeah.
You've talked about how opera on stage is much more diverse than it has been in the past. That doesn't seem to be the case in terms of management of opera companies.
That's very true. I mean, I think opera on stage has pretty much always been diverse. Black women, for instance, sang a lot on stages, even when there weren't black men singing on stages. Yeah. Then there was a time when black men were all the basses and the devils and the bad guys on stage, and the romantic leads coming in, speaking specifically about black men, came later. Then, for instance, you have Asian tenors. There's few of them coming into the business at a top level that you haven't seen as much of. And I still think, if you look at the data, I mean, Asians are even less in the world of opera than blacks or Latinos or any other marginalized community. And so that's very important to me, that the business side of it, the management of opera, it looks like the communities that they represent. You can't have a community that's 50% black or 30% Asian, like in the case of San Francisco, for instance. And the management of it has maybe 2 Asian persons or 0 black people, and it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Is there an understanding that that's a problem?
No, people say they understand, and you talk about it a lot. You can talk about it a lot, but there's nothing changing in it because the culture is so baked. We sort of do things in opera the same way that they've done them 100 years ago. Like nothing's changed. And that's also the beauty of it. Yeah. That's also the beauty of it. I don't want it to change too much. I don't mind a crazy production. I don't mind that kind of thing. But there has to be a way to open the fold a bit and welcome more people in. Yeah. And that's a distinct goal of mine, absolutely.
Because it's the only way opera can survive, isn't it?
The only way.
It has to look like the place it's serving.
Yes. It's essentially a community, not just opera. I mean, all arts, they're community-based. They're all I mean, look at the mission statement of any arts organization, be it a museum or a symphony orchestra or an opera company. It has something to do with the community. But oftentimes, the community isn't represented in the audience, and I think that's because it's not represented backstage and on stage. So if we diversify the backstage and the on stage, more people from the community will be invested in what's happening on stage.
It's interesting what you're saying about the changing roles for black singers.
Yeah.
Otello being a great example of that. I mean,
Yeah.
not often, rarely a black singer singing that role until very recent.
Right. I mean, I think there were others before in smaller theaters, maybe, but in the larger international houses like Covent Garden or like the Met in San Francisco and these other large theaters, that is not very common. And what's happening now, people say, "Oh, well, you know, there's more black singers singing on stage now than ever." You know, yes, sort of, but what's happening is the world of opera is creating more Porgy and Besses, if I should say. You know, they're creating more versions of Porgy and Bess where black people are only doing black roles. Those of us that were always singing the European rep will still sing the European rep, but there are not a lot of new people in that fold, unfortunately.
And it must be very frustrating for a black singer who's only being cast in Porgy and Bess.
I think it's very frustrating because there's some of the best singers I know are singing in those shows. You know, some of the best singers I know are singing in Porgy and Besses and you know, the new sort of black operas that are coming, that are being created, and it's the unfortunate side of it. But what it does is says, you know, it gives them the numbers. You know, oh well, we've cast, you know, X number of percentage of black people and X percentage of Asians. You know, and this kind of thing. And it gives them they tick the boxes of the quotas. You know.
Yeah, the musical Miss Saigon, I think, famously did that on Broadway and in the West End. It feels like those polls should be done, or those studies should be done without those shows included. Another of your projects in Los Angeles, as part of your residence at Los Angeles Opera, is the Russell Thomas Youth Artist Training Academy, RTYATT.
Yes.
Trying to think if that says anything. I don't think it does.
We call it Artiata.
Great, that's good. That's good. What's that about?
It's about getting kids from the Los Angeles community that are in high school that identify if they have any talent and if they have any interest. In other words? Yes. Yeah, we're trying to find young singers who have talent and find ways to support them at a very early age. You know, give them musical training, acting, dance. You know, we do it all, and each year we take up to 5 singers a year. Yeah, the first year we had 4 coming in, and the next year we're bringing 3 new ones for a total of 6.
So these would be what? How old?
14, 15, 16, yeah. In our first year, one of the students, she was a senior. We were sort of reluctant to take, you know, seniors as the last year of high school. We were sort of reluctant to take seniors, but she grew very quickly. She did very well in her auditions for university and conservatories, and she's going to an American school that's very expensive on a full tuition scholarship, which is huge. And that's sort of kind of what I was trying to do, find kids in the community that knew they had a talent, and their families knew they had a talent, but they didn't quite know what to do with it, and encourage them and support them as best we can. And it's been, so far, in a year on, very successful, I think.
And it goes back, doesn't it, to a kind of concept of, it wasn't that long ago that so many, if not the majority of opera singers, came from working class backgrounds, whether it was in Italy, whether it was in this country, whether it was in the States, and we sort of moved away from that.
We did, because trying to be an opera singer is very expensive. Yeah. It's very expensive. You know, if you're a kid growing up in New York, I think the average cost for a voice teacher in New York is $180 for 1 hour. I can't imagine.
So you've got to wait a lot of hours in a restaurant to pay for that.
That's a lot of money for a person that doesn't come from money. You know, there was a time when, you know, as you said, they came from working class families, and then there was a period where they were already from wealthier families. You know, because they could afford the music lessons and the voice lessons and the piano lessons and those kind of things. You know, so I'm trying to find a way to even or balance the scales in a small way.
Yeah. When do you think you'll be running an opera company?
I don't know. I, if it were up to me, in about 5 years.
And you'd sing as well? I mean, you'd keep...
It depends. Depends on the situation. I would love to have a Placido Domingo kind of situation, running an opera company and keep singing. But
Two opera companies.
Yeah, right. But I think it requires more attention. I think more commitment to the job of running the company than it does for me to keep singing. I mean, I would
it feels
love
you
to.
couldn't really run a company in the way you want to if you weren't living pretty much full time in the city where the company was.
Absolutely, and I think that's the kind of commitment that I would have to make, and I would be willing to make, because I think I could be more impactful on the other side than And I tell people this all the time, and they look at me like I'm crazy. You're at the height of your career. You know, why do you want to stop singing? I don't necessarily want to stop singing. I want to be impactful, and I think I could be more impactful in a role where I could give young singers an opportunity, create programs for young singers to get better and get support. Yeah. And that impact not just has a impact in the local community, it has an impact for decades, because of this young girl who got accepted to this huge school in America goes on to then have a career. She got her start in that program, you know, and hopefully then she does for someone else what was created for her. And then you sort of get this, you know, El Sistema type situation going, where people are feeding their community through music.
You said earlier on that you might have joined the army and then gone into politics. I mean, is that, if the 5-year plan's running the Opera House, is the 15-year plan to be a governor, or 25-year plan to be president? I think
running an opera company, as well as being a singer, is the most political you can possibly be. There's a lot of politics there, and I think that that's good experience. So if I get that part, I'm not thinking about you know, governor, president, senator, but I do often think about it. Yes.
Yeah, it's hard not to, isn't it, in the world in which we live.
Right.
Let's just finish by talking about what's coming next. Well, here, first of all, because having been away from the Royal Opera House for 9 years, you're back next year.
Yes, for my role debut as Calaf in Turandot, which Puccini, not really a Puccini singer per se, but I mean, I've done Cavaradossi, I've done La Bohème, but you know, Calaf was the first role that I ever learned, actually. And I knew I could never sing it, but I was like 19 and I learned the entire role. I learned it from beginning to end when I was 19 years old, because it was, again, one of those, it was Dame Gwyneth Jones singing in this production, I don't remember where it was, with Franco Bonisoli, and that I had a VHS of that production. Wow. And I burned it. Like it was.
The lines got worse.
It got worse and worse, worse and worse. But it's one of these. It's one of those memories that is like etched in my brain of hearing her and hearing the two of them just so battle each other in the riddle scene, you know. Yeah. And I can't wait to do that. Yeah.
And other ambitions of things you might do. I mean, well, Tannhäuser is, I think, in the diary, isn't it?
It is in the diary in a couple of theaters. Yeah, that's one. Peter Grimes. I'm dying to sing Grimes.
You have to sing Grimes.
I have to sing Grimes.
Yeah.
I have to. Jim Rodranches,
Really?
Elgar. I love it. I learned it. A British conductor was considering me for a concert of it, and I learned it in 3 days, and I just fell in love with it. And I've never been able to sing it.
Right. Well, we're going to put the word around.
Put it around. Spread it around YouTube.
Make sure that
Share it.
that happens here, because I think we all want to hear that. And you still sing concerts, and you still get to do a bit of chamber music, a bit of song.
Chamber music recitals. Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's the one time when singer has complete autonomy over what they're doing, and you can program whatever you want. And so I relish those opportunities for sure.
Because one of the pieces you did here, you gave a Rosenblatt recital here, where you sang something I think you do a lot, Knoxville, Summer of 1915, by Samuel Barber, which is normally a piece taken by female.
Yeah, done by sopranos. Yeah, but as we talked about, the text is written by a man, and it's about his experience growing up in the South as a little boy, and it's something I can relate to. And I thought that I would do a good job singing that piece, and so I just picked it up and decided to do it and programmed it, and it worked.
Yeah. And there is something magical, isn't there, about the sort of conversation of the adults and the adult world.
Yeah.
That the child is both part of
And not.
part.
Yeah, yeah. And I was that kid. I grew up in a southern home and sitting on the porch, listening to, sitting around my grandmother and listening to her conversations with all of our family. It's a piece that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to you doing that again. In the immediate future, we look forward to Otello. Thank you very much indeed for being with us this evening. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, Russell. July the 12th is the date that Otello opens here at Covent Garden. Performances run through until the 24th of July. Thank you to our audience here in the Claw studio. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world on YouTube in our Insights supported by Rolex. From all of us here at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, good night.